Hey, what's going on? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone. Today we're going to talk about something very interesting, nitro versus poly. Alright, so when we start talking about guitar finishes, the very first thing, especially when we get people ordering guitars from us, is it going to be nitrocellulose or is it going to be polyurethane? And the reason they do that is because the vintage guitars, old guitars were made with polyurethane or with nitrocellulose, and because it allows the wood to breathe, and it's thinner and it doesn't stifle the tone, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, by the tone of my voice, you can tell that I think and I know that this is a load of crap. And so we're going to talk about the differences. There are differences between the finishes, but one of the biggest hang-ups that people have about polyurethane versus nitrocellulose are kind of a moot point, and we're going to talk about the technicalities of why. Okay, anytime you paint a guitar, it has to be sealed somehow, and a lot of times those sealers, you can use grain fills and sort of stuff like that. But when we start talking about like a Fender style guitar, like a Tele or Strat, we go all the way back to the early 60s. They were using a material called Fullerplast, okay, to seal their bodies. And then they were spraying a thin layer of nitro over the top of it, okay? What this means is, and this Fullerplast that they were using on early Fender stuff, even though it was a nitro finish, was a poly style product with a catalyzer and catalyzer put together. So it was basically polyurethane. They just called it something different. Obviously they called everything different back then because certain stuff wasn't named and invented yet. But the long and the short of it is a catalyzed sealer, just like polyurethane. It got super hard, and then they would spray the nitro over it. Prior to that, they would use tons and tons and tons and tons of mils thick of nitro to seal the wood, or they would use a kind of vinyl actually and spray it, and then they would spray nitro over it. Okay, so that being said, all the guitars that you think are nitrocellulose, many of them were previously sealed with some sort of two-part urethane epoxy / epoxy sort of thing. Anyway, so what you have is more or less a urethane painted guitar with nitro on top of it. Okay, and people will argue with me about the facts of that, but it is true. You can do a lot of research. It's hard to find the information because it's not like Fender was gonna, especially now, is gonna come out and say, yeah, we just sprayed urethane on it and we put nitro over the top of it. But it's called Fullerplast. You can Google it. It was used on a lot of stuff, and so it really mutes the point that nitrocellulose allows the wood to breathe. Okay, you can go argue for weeks on the internet about wood breathing, but my guitars are dead. They're already, the wood's dead, so my guitars don't breathe. But and if you want a breathing guitar, you'd probably have to buy it from somebody else because I don't have any breathing guitars. That is super amounts of sarcasm, but I think that argument is really, really ridiculous. So why is there a poly versus nitro fight now? Most of the time, it's because of the overall thickness of the wood and this thing that people think it's going to kill the tone. Okay, but if we put a urethane underneath there and then we put nitro over the top of it, it doesn't matter. And then you're going to say, well, wait a minute. What about the cheap guitars nowadays that have 1,000,000 miles of polyurethane on them and like you can chip them off with your finger? So let's take, for instance, this guitar right here. This is a poly finish. This is a modern poly finish that was just sprayed a few months ago. Okay, a couple months ago actually. This is on one of our builds, and it is a little bit thicker than nitro. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is the thickness of the application has to do with the style of application more than it does the material itself. You can put it on thin, and people will say, well, I chipped my guitar right here and there's this huge layer and you can see how thick it is. For anybody that's done any kind of finishing work, this could be furniture, this could be cars, this could be guitars, it doesn't matter. When you spray a surface, the finish is going to automatically flow thin, okay, on all the flat surfaces, and then just because of surface tension and viscosity of the material, it's gonna kind of like pool up on the edge, even if there isn't anything to pool up against, okay? You know, because this is a finished edge, but just by the nature of a surface tension of a liquid, it's actually gonna get thicker around the edge. Most people, you'll see it, you see it all over the internet. They're like, well, right here by the cup, the jack cup, right here by the horn, right here by, and they're always measuring the thickness of the finish by the edge of the guitar, okay? That is very, very misleading, number one. And number two, as we've previously established, it doesn't really make a difference, okay? So why would you want to go with poly versus nitro? Well, let's talk about what the actual difference is. Obviously, if you look at this body right here, okay, and the level of shine there, and you look at this guitar. Now this guitar has been played and it's got one of our closet classic finishes on it, so it's obviously got some aging built into it. But you can see the level of the shine. And this guitar is about a year, no. This guitar is probably 6 months older than that one, okay? So how the finish is going to wear, because like we said earlier, nitro is gonna retain a softness to it for a lot longer. It's also going to, there's something called dying back, which means when you spray the nitro onto a surface that isn't 100% flat, it doesn't necessarily soak in, but it actually shrinks, and so it will retain some of the finish shape, some of the grain shape, and some of the overall shape of the wood. It can be easily seen on a guitar like this, and of course in the video it might be harder to see, but like with a TV yellow finish, the nitro actually kind of shrinks into the grain, if you will, so you get kind of more of that natural kind of feel, and it continues to do this over time. So you start to have kind of a more naturally wearing in sort of feel. The thing about polyurethane is that this guitar right here, as long as you don't beat it up or drop it, is pretty much going to retain that sort of finish as long as you own the guitar and as long as you take care of it. So really what it comes down to is not a tonal thing, it's not a quality thing, it's a what do you want the guitar to look like in 10 years? Or what do you want the guitar to look like now? Because of the inbuilt kind of elasticity of the molecules of polyurethane, it's going to do a lot less of this. Where it actually, and I don't know if you can see that in the video, where it actually checks, okay? So we're going to do a whole nother video about letting your guitar get cold and what that does to the finish. But this is something that can be done to a lacquer finish that is a lot more difficult, not impossible, but a lot more difficult to do to a urethane finish because the elasticity of the material is different, okay? So if you want to get the feel of an older guitar that is going to wear and it's going to cause, you know, cause the thing to feel and look older sooner, then maybe lacquer is the way to go. If you want the guitar to look new and look exactly like this for a really long time, then maybe urethane is the way you want to go. As far as tonally and the quality of the build of the instrument, has nothing to do with it at all whatsoever, okay? And if you have any questions about this or want to know any more specific information on what you heard today, my name is Dylan, this is Dylan Talks Tone, and we will talk to you soon because we're going to do another video about the effects of weather and stuff on these two different finishes. Have a great day.